to I May Be Wrong.
I don't know what this world is coming to,
but I don't think so. We're broadcasting from the greater Nashville area, the home of country music, beyond the borders of political correctness and identity politics. Facts and faith are our demarcations. Truth lights our path.
Here's the Barry White of Podcast Radio,
the Venerable Alfonso Ashworth.
My name is Adoakwe Oshunjimi, and I remember the Jewish refugees of North Africa and the Middle East.
As part of CUFI's continual effort to support Israel and the Jewish people, we share the Mizrahi Project,
telling the story of the more than 850,000 Jews from the Middle East and North Africa.
These are the stories of Jews.
These are the stories of Jews from Egypt, Algeria, Libya, Morocco, Tunisia, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and the Muslim but non-Arabic countries of Turkey and Iran.
These Jewish communities date back to the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem.
Communities that predate Christianity by 500 years and Islam by 1100 years.
They were expelled or forced to flee their homes, often leaving all of their possessions behind.
The Jews of Iran are the Jews of Persia.
The Jews of Iraq are the Jews of Babylon.
More than half of Israel's Jewish population is Mizrahi.
The Mizrahi are often called the forgotten refugees. I'm here to ensure that they are forgotten no longer.
My name is CJ Connolly, and I remember the Jewish refugees of North Africa and the Middle East.
And I remember the Jewish refugees
of North Africa
and the Middle East.
Israel has used the worst kind of abuse, ethnic cleansing, and imposing a regime of apartheid.
Israel continues to exercise apartheid in Palestine, which constitutes a crime against humanity, violence and terrorism that are being exercised against the Palestinian people.
These violations include the building of apartheid walls to legitimize the theft of land and to Judaize Jerusalem.
The separation wall is an example of the apartheid policy practiced by Israel.
Israel's practices of discrimination as well as extremism.
United Nations Watch, have the floor.
Mr. President, let me begin by putting the following on the record. Everything we just heard from the world's worst abusers of human rights, of women's rights, of freedom of religion, of the press, of assembly, of speech, is absolutely false and indeed Orwellian. Today's report does not consider Israelis to be deserving of human rights, consistent with the approach of this Council, where today's notorious agenda item against Israel completely ignores their human rights. Now, over the weekend, President Abbas announced he was giving his highest medal to Rima Khalaf, who resigned from the Economic Commission of Western Asia, a Beirut-based UN agency of 18 Arab states, after Secretary General Guterres rightly instructed her to remove an absurd report which accused Israel of, quote, apartheid. Mr. President, why is Mr. Abbas celebrating a report written by the notorious Richard Falk after his own Palestinian mission here tried in 2010 to remove Mr. Falk on the basis that he was, quote, a partisan of Hamas, as we know from WikiLeaks? The accusation against Israel is absurd. Israel's 1.5 million Arabs...
The delegation of Palestine has the floor.
More than one statement goes beyond the mandate of this sitting, using unacceptable terms about Ms. Rima Khalaf, and so we would like this to be stopped. We have noted some terms which are humiliating vis-à-vis the Council, and we call for the respect of our tradition within the Human Rights Council. Thank you.
We would support the viewpoints that have already been expressed by the State of Palestine as well as Egypt.
Now, the previous speaker can continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Israel's 1.5 million Arabs, whatever challenges they face, enjoy full rights to vote and to be elected in the Knesset. They work as doctors and lawyers. They serve on the Supreme Court. Now, I'd like to ask the members of that commission that commissioned that report, the Arab states from which we just heard, Egypt, Iraq, and the others, how many Jews live in your countries? How many Jews lived in Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco? Once upon a time, the Middle East was full of Jews. Algeria had 140,000 Jews. Algeria, where are your Jews? Egypt used to have 75,000 Jews. Where are your Jews? Syria, you had tens of thousands of Jews. Where are your Jews? Iraq, you had over 135,000 Jews. Where are your Jews? Mr. President, where is the real apartheid? Why is there a UN Commission on the Middle East that does not include Israel? From the 1960s and the 70s, they refused to include Israel. Where is the apartheid, Mr. President? Mr. President, why are we meeting today on an agenda item singling out only one state, the Jewish state, for targeting? Where is the apartheid, Mr. President?
Wow, that was sobering. And what can I say other than it's amazing how this information is being swept under the media's rug. But today we are going to expose this for what it is. I have a special guest that's on hold. He's waiting to come on. Dumisani Washington is the National Diversity Outreach Coordinator for over 7 million Christians United for Israel, or CUFI. He's also the director of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, IBSI. He is a graduate of the San Francisco Conservatory of Music and director of the Zion Academy of Music in Stockton. Dumisani is a pastor and author whose latest book is entitled Zionism and the Black Church, Why Standing with Israel Will Be the Defining Issue for Christians of Color in the 21st Century. He and his wife, Valerie, have been married 31 years and have 6 children ages 18 to 29. Welcome to the show, Mr. Dumisani Washington. How you doing, sir?
Al, how you doing today, sir?
Oh, man, I'm doing fantastic. I thought I lost you there for a second. I'm humbled. One, I'm have you on the show. And the video was just, one, inspiring, and at the same time, it was sort of horrifying to hear that message coming from that body, And so I'm gonna do is turn you loose on this, because it's just a 30-minute program. And I know that people are going to want to hear your responses from that. So let's get right to it. How did you get involved with CUFI?
I've been on staff with CUFI. This next month will be 5 years. And before, I was doing work with Christians United for Israel, which is over 7 million members, the largest pro-Israel organization in the country. I actually started my own organization, Al, called the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. I started that the year before, and that was inspired on an Israel trip. Back in 2012, I was one of the pastors who went to Israel as part of a CUFI trip, led by, at that time, the African-American outreach coordinator, Dr. Michael Stevens. I was blessed to be able to go on the trip. Someone had put me on the trip. I lead those trips now myself. I had never gone to Israel before. I had always loved Israel. I was kind of raised in a Christian home, a very, pro-Israel kind of Zionist home. Not a lot of political stuff, but in terms of biblical Zionism, the children of Israel, a lot of the connection in terms of the Black experience and the Israelites, all those types of things. And that's which pretty standard as many Black, Baptists, if you will, or other denominations. And so that was my framework. But when I went to Israel, saw the modern state for myself, it was just blown away. I'm completely blown away. Everything from technology to the ancient sites to just the people, the culture, all those things. One of the things that happened for me, Al, was while I was there, I felt a strong inclination to strengthen Israel solidarity in the Black community, and also Israel-Africa relations. Africa had been a study and a love of mine for years as well. So those two things just kind of converged. So when I came back to the States, I started the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, an organization that my son now directs. It still exists. I did that for a year, speaking in colleges and churches and even in synagogues for about a year, sharing about Dr. King's pro-Israel legacy. the significance of it even today, his prophetic words, what he warned about. I mean, literally days before he was assassinated, one of the last things he was talking about was Israel and about the importance of the black community and the nation as a whole standing in solidarity with Israel, standing for peace. And even his colleagues after his assassination and along with his wife and his father, starting an pro-Israel organization called BASIC, Black Americans to Support Israel Committee. There's a long, deep heritage and tradition, particularly in the black community when it comes to Israel and the Jewish people. A lot of connections that are there, and those things were just kind of unfolding. And I was sharing those things with pastors and church members and rabbis and Jewish brothers and sisters all over the country. And I did that for about a year. And my colleagues, my friends there at CUFI basically said, would you come and do what you're doing with Christians United for Israel? My wife and I, we talked about it. We prayed about it. We felt God was giving us the green light, and it has been a blessing. My life is crazy. I pastor in Northern California still. I've been pastoring about 15 years. So somehow between that and this with CUFI, traveling quite a bit, I'm out of my pulpit several times a year throughout the year. I have an amazing staff, amazing people, and it's been just really a blessing because they know what I'm doing, and they'll tell me, Pastor, we miss you when you're not here, but we get it. We know this is God's call for you. You do what you're doing, and it has been nothing but a blessing. That challenge, but a blessing. And so, Al, it has been about human rights. It has been about scripture. It has been about teaching. There's a lot of things that converge when it comes to this whole Israel issue for me personally. And the video that your listeners and viewers saw is just one example of it. Of the many stories, my role with CUFI is the National Diversity Outreach Coordinator. For those that are listening, you can always go on CUFI.org, CUFI.org, and that's the website for the organization. Get all kinds of information. We have events all over the country. I'll be in Rochester, New York in a couple of days, and in Atlanta, Georgia. So you can see where my colleagues and I will be, different events and everything. So you can be involved because it is an activist. The Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel was never a membership organization. It was literally an institute. I write books. One of my first books called Zionism and the Black Church. You can order it on our website as well, IBSI-now.org, IBSI-now.org, and also speaking and lecture materials. But CUFI is an activist organization now. It is one in which for Christians who want to get involved, they want to attend events, they want information, they want to spread this information with their churches or their communities, that's where you would go. It is not just the largest, but the most ethnically diverse pro-Israel organization in the country, growing at hundreds of thousands a month. We have our national summit in Washington, D.C. every year. And when we do, thousands of Christians and Israel supporters come from all over the country and around the world. 31 different nations have been represented at this summit over the last couple of years. And so what this does here, Al, like I said in that video, it tells the truth about Israel and the Jewish people, first and foremost to the church, so that the Christians understand their biblical mandate, but far beyond that as well, starting there with Christians understanding what it is to stand with Israel, what those scriptures mean by I'll bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you, or pray for the peace of Jerusalem, what that actually means. But also, Al, like I said, when it comes to human rights, that video, I'm not sure if it was the first or the second one, but when you watch the one with the United Nations, Hillel Nur.
It was the second, yes.
Is an Israeli, and he is a human rights activist. The second one, yes, sir. And with that, Al, he, as you saw in the video, was illustrating what goes on in the United Nations every day. That was just a day in the life, if you will. This happens every day, all the time, has been going on for decades, meaning, unfortunately, the body, the international body that was designed shortly after World War II, to be this place, this meeting place, this community where international leaders would come together to assure there would not be things like a genocide in Europe of the Jews or Rwanda, those types of things, to ensure that there would be safety and clear communication, has unfortunately been turned as a weapon against Israel. Oftentimes, what its human rights bodies do within the United Nations is just what you saw in that video. They'll sit and they'll pontificate, and they'll pass false resolution after false resolution, condemning the only viable democracy in the place where, whether regardless of your religion, regardless of your gender, regardless of who you are, you have equal access under the law, just like you do in the United States. And it's no more perfect. The United States is not about to be in a perfect place. There's rule of law. You have an Arab population. 20% of Israel's population is Arab, both Christian and Muslim. They serve on the Supreme Court. There are other judges in the lower courts. They're in the military. They're in the medical field. Anything that you'd want to do, you can accomplish there in Israel because it gives you the opportunity. There are Jews of all types of ethnic backgrounds who've returned to the land from Ethiopia, from Poland, from Argentina. This is one of the things that's a modern day miracle. The tribe of Israel scattered to the four corners of the earth and returning to the land. And one of the things that video underscored was particularly what we call the Mizrahi community, which is a Hebrew word roughly meaning from the east. These ancient Jewish communities from Algeria, from Egypt. Those of you who are the Bible students, you hear about how when Jesus was a little boy and Herod was going to kill him, the word of God says that Joseph was told to take the child down into Egypt. Why? Because the ancient communities, Jewish communities of North Africa, the Middle East, once again, some 3,000 years old, Jewish people living throughout the region, and many people aren't aware of it. One of the many slanders against Israel is that it is some sort of settler colonial state. Some European people who fake or quote unquote fake Jews got up one day, left Europe, went to Palestine, stole lands from Arab Palestinians, and that's Israel. That's a lie. Everything that I just told you is a lie, but it is the most propagated lie when it comes to international studies, when it comes to understanding what actually Zionism is. And Zionism is simply the belief that Israel is the homeland for the Jewish people. As Hillel Noor was confronting each of those states like Libya, like Kuwait, these human rights abusing states. Libya is a place where there's some 1 million Africans that are enslaved, but the media says almost nothing about it whatsoever, including places like Saudi Arabia, where there's African slaves, in Mauritania, where there's African slaves, in Qatar, where there's African slaves. Those things aren't discussed in the United Nations. There's no resolutions about that whatsoever. What they do is they sit and they focus on demonizing and delegitimizing Israel. So you saw they had no answer to his question. Algeria, where are your Jews?
Right.
Egypt, where are your Jews? Iraq, where are you? The answer is they were all ethnically cleansed, driven from the land. Most of them having returned to Israel, their homeland, after 1948, once it was reestablished. This is part of the reality. And I'll say this last thing, Al, and I'll let you get a word in because I want to dominate your whole show.
That's okay.
Al, what we understand is that this demonization of Israel is not the people who are paying for this is not the Israelis. Israel, those of you who may know, as a modern nation, though it's tough. I mean, I have a lot of Israeli friends, and I mean, the economy, it's bustling, but for the middle income and working class people, it's kind of rough because much of their economy is driven by its tech sector. It is the second largest per capita startup nation. So you have, in other words, the United States, our Silicon Valley, where I am, I just live about an hour or so away from San Jose. Israel is known as the second Silicon Valley. Virtually every form of tech and innovation that you can think of either originated or has a research and development center in Israel. Right now, as we speak, this tiny nation, the size of New Jersey, population a little bit over 8 million people. What's amazing is that as they are continuing to thrive while they're having to defend themselves against all kinds of terrorism, the people who are paying for the bias of the United Nations are the people that are suffering. Like I mentioned to you before, the slavery throughout the Arab Muslim world, most people don't know because the United Nations and other international bodies are so focused on Israel, they will never tell you that. There's been over 500,000 Syrians slaughtered in their civil war since 2011. Most people don't know that. What we just found out now, there are Palestinians who live in Syria. Over 4,000 of them have been killed over the last several years. Even the Palestinian human rights crowd won't acknowledge that. They won't touch it because their focus is demonizing Israel. The world pays for international anti-Semitism. The world pays for Israel hatred. The people who are dying right now in Venezuela, who are serving in labor camps because there's not enough food and the government is forcing them to work the land. No one really knows about that because the United Nations won't bring light to that. They're only going to talk about Israel. The United Nations, unfortunately, has a lot to do with why there's so much anti-Semitism and lack of understanding about what the Jewish state of Israel actually is.
Well, you've read my mind. I mean, almost everything you've said is some question I may have asked. So keep it in mind that, of course, let me say again, I appreciate you coming on. This is Pastor Dumisani Washington with CUFI and, of course, with the IBSI, which is the Institute for Black Solidarity. Quick question. All that you just said, let's bring it back to the United States quickly.
Yes, sir.
Is this what you're talking about with the United Nations? Has that emboldened people like Ilhan Omar and those who have come out recently with their anti-Semitic statements out of our own government?
Yes, absolutely. What you are hearing from that, from Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and other, whether it's in the Congress or other parts of state government, like I live in California, and we just got through battling this horrific ethnic studies curriculum that was presented to the Board of Education that completely ignored the Jews as an ethnic people, ignored even other religious minorities like the Coptic Christians who are being slaughtered right now. That's the other part of it. There's a Christian genocide happening right now that also the United Nations won't touch. Yes, Al, they are emboldened by international bodies like the United Nations, because what happens is that here, those of you who are listening, if you have to kind of go to this next step. If the United Nations as an official international body is passing official resolutions condemning Israel as an apartheid state, as an abuser of women's rights, and all those other lies, that document is then sent out throughout the nations. Where those documents read with that nice seal on there for the United Nations, it's read in poli-sci departments and colleges, all of the universities. It's read in civics governments classes in high schools. In other words, it poisons the mind of the young people. It poisons the media. It actually, because what happens is that here I am, Al, and for those of you particularly, just consider history for a moment. Think about in terms of Black history, how you had folks who were so anti-Black, who were so pro-slavery, they would get scientists to declare that we were somehow less than human.
Right.
They would get them to declare that somehow we could not think on their level and operate. All of those things were lies. They were propaganda to justify our enslavement and our Jim Crow treatment. Fast forward to right now, that's exactly what's happening in Israel. The exact same thing, because they're said by these officials and these potentates and these diplomats, it gives it an air of legitimacy, but it's just like what was going on in Nazi Germany.
Right.
So yes, Al, you're absolutely right. People hear that. They see that, they get emboldened, and so what they wind up doing is condemning Israel without even knowing any of the facts. And also, Dr. King taught us this, anti-Zionism, hatred for Israel, is always hatred for the Jews. They'll try to intellectualize it and tell you that it's not, but they'll say at the same time the stuff like, oh, Israel's an apartheid state that doesn't have the right to exist. I challenge the people to hear me when I'm saying this. Does it make any sense for you to say, I don't have a problem with Kenyan people, but Kenya doesn't have the right to exist?
Right, it makes no sense.
Makes no sense. And so it makes no sense when it comes to Israel, but people have been so conditioned, they just say it and walk away as if they just said nothing.
We've got about a couple of minutes, but one thing I want you to address quickly, and we may have to do a whole 30 minutes on this. How does this compare to the teachings that are being taught in the Black church today about Black Hebrews, and how does that compare, the contrast between what you're talking about, people of color who are Jewish, comparing to what people are teaching with this Black Hebrewism?
Well, unfortunately, and yeah, that is another study, the Black Hebrew Israelite movement, which is broad, unfortunately, the most negative aspects of it, because there's different aspects of it, the most negative aspects of it are at root anti-Semitic, they are at root anti-Israel. It is this part of it is the false teaching that only black people, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, whether they're in the United States, whether they're in Haiti, only black people and other quote unquote people of color, whether they be Native Americans, that type of thing, that only they are the true Israelites and all others are imposters. It is false teaching. It is cultic. It is very, very dangerous. It is the white version of the white supremacist, only white people can be Jews. It's the mirror image of the same thing. It's just on the black side of it. It's very, very damaging.
Well, and we'll have a show. I hope to get you back on to talk about that in more depth, because I believe that's an issue as well. But quickly, I want you to, one, let people know how they can contact you, and then finish up by talking about your organization. Go ahead.
Sure. Absolutely. Again, I would recommend everyone go to CUFI.org. If you're looking for me specifically, you can find me on social media, Dumisani, Dumisani, Dumisani Washington. On Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, you can see some of my messages and information that's there. You can also reach out to me if you want. For example, you're a pastor, a leader, or someone who's more interested in CUFI, wants to do an event there, you want some more information, email me directly, and I'll share that with my wife because I can't always answer all my emails, but she helps me with that. My first name, Dumisani.Washington@CUFI.org. Dumisani, Dumisani.Washington@CUFI.org. Reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. Again, I travel the country. If I'm in your area, I would love to connect with you and meet you there.
Well, I will post that information as well on my Facebook, my feeds, and on my chat. And I want to thank you for being a part of the program this morning. I know that Lonnie Poindexter will also like to say hey. And, of course, if you would like to come back on at any time, just let me know, brother. God bless you.
I will. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Of course, that was Pastor Dumisani Washington with CUFI, the course Christians United for Israel, and also the director of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, or IBSI. If you would like to know more, you can, of course, go to my website and look in the chat, and there's information there about Pastor Dumisani Washington. You know, there's a lot happening with this issue. And the reason I wanted to bring this message is because there is a contrast at what is being taught here in our schools and our universities based on false teaching compared to what the truth is about not only just Israel, but what the people of color have in their behalf in what's going on in Israel. And it's like what Pastor Washington said, it's a false teaching. The United Nations is funding a lot of this propaganda. It's giving people like Ilhan Omar this anti-Semitic stage to proselytize, to promote this hatred toward Israel, and of course defending a terrorist organization like Hamas. That's where we are, and it's very dangerous. And of course, I know that you're out there in the listening world. You know, you think topics like this doesn't matter. You know, you like something more sexy or more controversial in terms of what the media is talking about. You know, they're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, and we're going to talk about that too. But I wanted to bring this to the forefront, and there was no one else that I could even imagine that would be perfect to talk about this subject, because he's an expert on the issue. He has worked in this field for many years, and he is a voice that needs to be heard, especially for those out there in the wilderness. I want to thank you, of course, all that are listening in today. If you would like to listen more, you can go to my website, go to ImayBeWrong.com. Go there, and actually you can get the podcast. You can check out the website, see what's happening, and please subscribe to the website. We need you to subscribe so we can get that information out to you in a very timely manner. And of course, if someone is feel led to, you can also donate or be a contributor to the show. And we would very, very much so appreciate that, because this is something that has to be done. We can no longer sit on the sideline. And as Lonnie Poindexter used to say on Line Chasers, we can no longer sit on the sideline with our bags packed, waiting for Jesus to come. But of course, I want to thank you all for being a part of the show today. And don't forget, God bless you, God bless America, and peace.
You've been listening to Alfonso Ashworth, the Barry White of Podcast Radio. Go forth and share his message. I may be wrong, but I don't think so. Remember, no two people can ever occupy the same place at the same time. You were uniquely and wonderfully made. Born an original. Don't die a copy. God bless. Peace.